Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using the clear stamp set from Sweet November Stamps called Mermaid Hair. So the products I'll be using, as I mentioned, is the Mermaid Hair clear stamp set, and I'll be using the top right hand image plus the Ray of Light stencil from My Favorite Things to create some ink blending of some sun rays coming through water. So I've used a rectangle die to cut out some COPIC Express-It cardstock, as I'll be doing my full scene on that. I've grabbed out my Misti and just popped that in there, and we'll grab out our stamp now and just place it. I'm going to center her kind of right in the middle of that COPIC panel. Get her attached to the front of my Misti. Make sure that that's tucked in that right hand corner. And using some Memento Tuxedo black ink, I'm going to stamp out that image. Now I'll do another stamping to make sure we've got a nice clear impression. And now she's all ready to go. Now I also want to create a mask because I will be doing the ink blending over the top. So just grab some scrap masking paper from my stash, and I'm just going to use my scissors now to get that all cut out, ready to go over my image. As you know, I'm a very slow fussy cutter, so I wouldn't put you through that slow cutting, but you can see I'm just moving that image around as I run my scissors around the edge, just right along that black line so that we don't get any kind of white shadowing around our ink blending. So just make sure you're moving that piece of masking paper as you're fussy cutting that out rather than moving the scissors. And now it does get a little bit fiddly around here, so I don't actually cut in between those little eyes because I was worried that I might accidentally cut them off. So just be very careful as you're cutting around, and we can always fill that in later with a bit of Copic marker if you do have any kind of white showing after you've done your ink blending. So now I'm just going around the claws, and again I'm just going to go just around those claws but not cut in between them of our little crab, and go around the little seaweed that's mixed through her hair. This is such a gorgeous image with those little added extras of the fish, the crab and the seaweed all clinging through her beautiful long locks. Sorry, I'm a bit off camera then while I finish off the cutting. But now that's all cut out, I'm just going to line that up. So I normally go to a small portion, so that's why I chose the crab's little claw and eyes. Then it makes it a lot easier then to line up the rest of that image in the bigger sections and give that a good press down, making sure it's nice and attached. Now for my ink blending, I'm going to be using Distress Oxides in Squeeze Lemonade, Tumbled Glass and Broken China, and I've grabbed out my Make Art Staion, and I've just got a little bit of little tape there that I've taken off most of the stickiness so that that holds my panel in place, and then I'll just use the magnets to hold my stencil in place. Now when I'm doing this kind of blending with the stencil but making it water, I always do the ink blending of the actual rays first, and then we'll come in after and do the blending of the colour over the top so that you get those nice kind of rays shining through the water. I'm just using my dome sponge applicators to do this ink blending. So I initially laid down my Squeeze Lemonade and then the Tumbled Glass. Then I'm just going to go back and forward between these two colours to make sure we've got a nice smooth blend between the two colours. So it works nicely because they do create that kind of little greeny, colour or aqua colour that will go between them once they're adhered together. Now I'm using my Broken China and just blending that through with the Tumbled Glass. Just be careful, I did move my stencil a little bit then, but no damage was caused to my rays. So just kind of pushing those colours up together to make sure we've got that nice smooth blend between our colours. So just keep working until you're happy that you've got a nice blend. And now I'll set that aside to dry for a little while, and once that's dried, this is when I go over using the same colours that I did laying down my rays, but just working in a little bit more of a lighter hand so that those rays do stand out. That's why you'll see me dabbing off some of the ink onto my glass mat and then just using that ink that's on the glass mat to add the color to my panel. So you just get that nice, soft color over the top of those pre-colored rays that we've already done. Now we'll go in with our broken china down the bottom. So I'm going to go quite dark down the bottom because it's a bit deeper, and then really lighten that hand. So you can see me just dabbing my sponge markers on that bit of ink that I've got onto my glass mat to make sure we've got that nice light pressure and light color. So go in with that tumbled glass to blend up from that broken china. As you can see, just working in circular motions. Now we'll pull off our mask, and you can see she is perfect behind that mask. Now I did let that panel time to dry before I started the colouring. So now we'll do the Copic colouring of this gorgeous girl. So I'm just going in with my lightest marker, which is going to be my E00 to work out where my shadows will be. And then with a light hand, I'm just using what will be my darkest marker, the E04, just to add those shadows in. So obviously her hair will throw a bit of shadow over her face and also her arms. And obviously I've got the kind of sunlight coming from the top left hand corner for this particular image. My next color is going to be E13, so we'll blend that out, obviously going up into those eyes and also where her little bikini throws some shadow. Then we'll blend that out with E21, just working into what will be our highlight, which will be kind of the top of her forehead and the nose and just that left hand cheek. And obviously anything on the left hand side of her body, the top of her arm and the top of that belly will be exposed to our lightest color, which is the E00. Now I just wanted to put a little bit of kind of pinkiness to her cheeks. So I've just grabbed out a couple of red markers, R32 and R00, and just on that lighter side I just blended that out a little bit with the lightest marker, E00. Now I will have all my markers noted kind of up in that top left hand corner, but they will also be in the description box below if you want to refer to any of the colors I use for this card. So I've just colored her eyes up, and now we'll start on those gorgeous locks. Definitely this card, this stamp set, mermaid hair is just perfect for the mermaids that are in this stamp set. It's just gorgeous long locks. So I'm just doing my lightest color just to work out where all my shadows will be, which is my Y11. So just kind of working in little flicking motions while I work out where those are going to be situated. So once I've got that worked out, I'm going to grab my darkest marker, which will be putting our shadows in, which is the YR27. And again, just doing little flicking motions to get that out. So we see that little starfish will throw a little bit of shadow as well, kind of behind where her head is. And then where her tail goes, and any kind of little dips and divots where the hair kind of flows from around her tail or around her body. So obviously anywhere down the bottom of her hair, which is quite deep in the ocean, will be a little bit dark. So I'm putting a little bit of that shadow down there. Obviously where that tail comes around, we'll have a little bit of shadow. My next color I'll be using is YR24. Again, just flicking that pen out so we get some nice kind of hair strands coming as we color this in. And just flicking up from there. Where her arm is there, we'll throw a little bit of shadow around our little crab and tail. Just slowly working into what will be our highlight part of the hair. Flicking up. So I just trying to go with the flow of the hair. So any of my flicks I try and go in with that flow. My next color will be my Y15. So just flick that down and up. So I like to move my card base around so that it's make sure we do get in with that flow of her beautiful long locks. Flicking down from where the fish is tucked in there and just slowly flicking up. The next colour will be our Y13, so this will be our second lightest colour, and then we'll bring in our Y11, which is that original colour that we used, and our lightest colour, which will be where our highlight will be. So I'm slightly off camera there, I do apologise about that. And we'll come down and finish off in this section of her hair. Now I'm just going to go back through, not all of the colours, but some of the darker colours, just to re-establish those little flicks of like hair, so it looks more kind of piecey and more realistic. So I'm just going to bring in this Y27. We'll blend that out slightly with our YR24. And just slowly just kind of create some little piecing in those little shadow areas. Flicking down and up as we go around. And down to those fish, just trying to kind of lift that pen up as we finish each of those lines. And then the only other colour I'll use will be the Y15. Just slowly blending it up and flicking it into that highlight space. And now we'll get her both her little bikini and also her tail coloured up. So I'm just using very similar colours for those. And I do want her hair, because I'm going to kind of make her little tail a little bit see-through. So I just wanted to add a little bit of that hair colour in, only lightly, because obviously you've got the colour of the tail over the top. So I'm just using the two lightest colours, the Y13 and the Y11, to put that where that hair might show through that tail. Now we're going to go back in with those greens. So I'm going over this whole area with the lightest colour green, including that yellow, which is the G000. Then we'll go in with our darkest colour, which will be YG45 in this combo. I won't be using the darker marker in that tail because, as I said, I'm going to make that kind of a little bit see-through looking. We'll blend that out with the G02, then the G00, and I am going to put a little bit of that G00 down into this tail. And then we'll bring in that lightest colour again, the G000, to fully colour that tail in, including this lighter part down the bottom. Now I'm just going to reinforce those colours, so I'm going to bring all those markers back, so exactly the same way that I did it initially, blending that out with the G02, just to make sure we've got a nice beautiful colour and a nice blend. So G00, again just working that up a little bit in that bottom of that tail. And in our G000 to fully colour that up. We might just add a little bit more yellow into that tail so that we still get that like hair showing through. And then I just wanted to add some little like dots and beauty spots on her tail. Initially I brought in the G46, but it wasn't quite dark enough, so I did end up bringing the BG75, and I was much happier with how that showed through on that tail. Now I'm just going to do some dotting, kind of colouring of this starfish in her hair. So I went in initially with the lightest colour, the Y19, my darkest colour YR09, and finish that off with the YR04, just little dots that I'm doing, and then finish off again with that original colour, the Y19. Now with the crab I'm going to do very similar colours so that you're not having to get heaps of colours, and just bring in those same markers that I used for that starfish in her hair. Just working a little flicking motions to make sure we get a nice smooth blend with this cute little crab. And we'll bring in that original colour again, the Y19, to finish colouring that up. And I did realise I missed a couple of little legs there. Now for the seaweed I'm going to use 3 colours, so because it's quite small I'm just going to go straight in with my darkest marker just to put a bit of shadowing down the bottom. And then blend that out with the YG45 and just leaving a little bit of white up the top for our lightest colour, which will be our G02. So again, kind of using the same colours we used for that tail, so that we kind of match everything in nicely. I've got those two at the top. And I'm going to again just colour these fish, both the little one and this one the same colour, with BG09 as my darkest, because they're quite small. I'm not worrying about putting the lightest colour in first, so I've just gone straight in with the darkest, blend that out, and then our lightest colour will be the BG11. And that is all our colouring done. Now, initially I wanted to use this Mermaid Hair Don't Care, but I didn't have quite enough room. I didn't plan that out very well. So I was going to pop it up the top, but it would have kind of put a little bit of that sentiment over her hair, which I didn't want to do. So in the end, I scrapped using that and grabbed out this stamp set from My Favourite Things to use as a sentiment. So I grabbed out my Misti, and I'm just going to pop that sentiment down the bottom. Just going to make sure that that's lined up. It wasn't quite straight, so I've lined that up to make sure it is. Made sure that's tucked into that right hand corner, so when I stamp this out, if it does move, I know exactly where to put that back. I couldn't quite reach that, so I've re-stamped that 3 times just to make sure we've got a nice impression. And I always set that aside to dry so I don't smudge my sentiment. Now, I always love using some little fish to add a little bit of detailing to our background. So I've grabbed out the Friends with Fins from My Favourite Things. It's got these little fishes in there that are solid, and I'm using very similar colours to what I've used for my ink blending. I will have all of those detailed in the description box below, and I'm just going to match those in. That one didn't want to attach, so I'm using another kind of greeny, but it wasn't really showing up, so I tried a few different combinations of ink for this one, just to make sure that you were able to see that in that background, but they are only silhouettes. And I added one more, kind of just those little fishes rising up and around her to kind of draw your eye to her, but also put a little bit of interest in that background. So I'm just using 2 colors here because it is like that kind of bluey green, and now you can see that that's all dry and we're ready to attach it to our card base. So I've just chosen white because I just thought it made that panel pop with those beautiful yellows and blues. So I'm just lining that up so you've got that small border around the outside. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. This mermaid is so gorgeous, and those flowing locks are so fun to colour. And just adding those rays and just a couple of little spots of where the fish are floating through around her, I think just really adds to this card. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.